So I'm Jason Jarvis. I'm a commercial fisherman out of Westerly, Rhode Island. I'm also on the Rhode Island Marine Fisheries Council, and I'm also the board president of the North American Marine Alliance. Been in the fishing business. Well, I've been fishing ever since I was a kid, but I've been in the commercial fishing industry for close to 25 years. And I started trapping green crabs probably 9 years ago for blackfish bait for the charter boat that I worked on. So yes, that's the other part of my life. I also spent 20 years on and off working on party boats and charter boats. And now I'm fully involved in catching green crabs for bait and helping to get people interested in them for food.
Nice. And so how did you get involved in the green crab fishery?
Well, it was by accident. I worked for a captain who on a gill netter, and in the off season when we weren't fishing, he started setting green crab traps because there was a demand for them for bait. And once he started doing it, I helped him do it and realized that he's actually making some decent money selling green crabs. But we've had this conversation. When the pandemic hit, the fishery I was in pretty much collapsed. There was no demand for it. And so my wife and I were self-employed anyway, so we shift around all our life to, make sure we pay the bills. So we did some grocery shopping, grocery delivery. And then midway through the year, thanks to you guys at greencrab.org, I started getting phone calls for green crabs for bait because nobody else was doing it in my area. And the crazy part is, I talked to you about this before. I was not in a good place. It was pretty tough to realize that your job has disappeared due to a pandemic that nobody expected to happen, or they did expect to happen, but didn't give enough warning for. So I started trapping green crabs because the demand for them got every morning. I've thrown my traps, and then I was delivering green crabs 3-4 days a week. And the beautiful part of it is I said from August through the first week of December, I made $11,000 selling green crabs. So yeah, it gave me purpose, gave me something to do, kept my head up, and yeah, it was a good thing. And that's how I recently got into it.
Nice. And have you worked with any species that are impacted by green crabs? How has their invasive impact kind of influenced your daily life as a harvester?
Well, that's interesting too, because I've worked in every part of the industry, commercial fishing, recreational fishing, charter fishing, and people don't realize that green crabs love eating small oysters, small soft shell clams, anything that they can break, any mollusk or any bivalve that a green crab can break the lip of the shell, they will eat it. So the oyster farming industry has been hit by green crabs over the years, because blue crabs and green crabs and mud crabs or marsh crabs love oysters. So if a green crab gets into a bag of oyster seed, they can do a lot of damage. The really tiny baby oysters. But I've also seen I think they're pushing out other species. I mean, they're so abundant in Winnapaug Pond where I am. You don't see as many blue crabs in that pond anymore. And I just think it's a biomass thing. The pond can only support so many, as my friend calls them, so many insects. And I mean, they're pretty much bugs. So their biomass is pretty large. Although I did put a good dent in it last year. I tried anyway.
Nice. And you talked about this a little bit before, but do you primarily or mostly sell green crabs on the bait market?
Yes. and it's still really funny because when you tell people they can eat green crabs, they look at you sideways. And I'm like, well, people used to think lobsters were garbage and they fed them to prisoners. So, I mean, let's look at our history. Monkfish was a trash fish. Skate was a trash fish. Now there's some of the highest grossing seafood products in the country. So I was skeptical, and then I ate some. I was like, hey, pretty good.
Yeah, they're yummy. What are some of your favorite ways to eat green crabs?
Well, because, they're a lot of work. I just like taking the roe and the broth and making a bisque or a chowder. Like I'm always making clam chowder or a seafood stew or seafood chowder in the fall. And I made up the broth and then took all the roe and some of the meat from the bigger claws. And I made a seafood chowder with blackfish, scallops, mussels, clams, soft shell clams, green crab roe, and green crab broth. And it's amazing because the broth definitely adds a different level of flavor to it. It's not just a clam or fish broth. So that so far is my favorite, but now I got to experiment some more.
Yeah, it sounds delicious. Love a green crab chowder.
It was good. And I still tell friends of mine about it. And they're like, are you kidding me? I'm like, don't knock it till you try it. It's pretty funny. That's the American way. Oh, we can't eat that. It's like, well, you've never tried it. How do you know?
Exactly.
I guess a funny example would be, think about this. People love Chilean sea bass, but have they ever seen one? It's called a toothfish. It's one of the ugliest animals you've ever seen in the ocean. It is a homely looking critter. It's like, if people saw those before they changed the name to Chilean sea bass, they probably never would have eaten them. So I don't know. It's kind of funny.
I hear you completely. So just like a few more questions, but
sure.
In terms of looking at expanding the green crab fishery, are you one of the only green crab harvesters in your area? Or is this something that you've seen more people enter the industry in recent years?
I think in South County, there's only 3 of us from Newport to Westerly that harvest them. Maybe 4. And then there's a girl on Block Island that's doing it now. So yeah, it's pretty interesting. 4 people out of the state of Rhode Island doing it, and there are a lot of green crabs in the state. So yes, I'm going to definitely expand, but I need to get a motor for my boat first. That makes it a little easier.
Completely. On a related note, like what barriers to entry do you see for future green crab harvesters or people wanting to enter the industry?
I think that the barriers are just the closed-minded food system, so to speak, or the closed-minded thinking when it comes to our food system. People have never thought of green crabs as food, but they've thought of them as food in Europe for 100 years or more. So we're a little behind the times on that one. So I think that's definitely one of the obstacles. The biggest obstacle is creating the market. And we'll get there. I think it's going to be a matter of just getting people to try them. Like I was skeptical until I tried eating the roe, and I ate the roe, and I was like, oh my God. I'm a big fan of seafood. I'm a big fan of sushi, sashimi. And I was like, this would be amazing. So now we have a few things we're working on. I'm not going to let the cat out of the bag yet, but it's going to be a little relationship between the invasive green crab predator of oysters and oysters. So my boss and I promised we're not going to tell anybody about it yet.
Top
serious, because her daughter is a great chef, young kid, but a very talented chef, and it kind of runs in the family. So we're working on a little recipe, and we got to try it a few times before we let the cat out of the bag. But it's going to be combining green crabs and oysters.
I love it. That sounds delicious.
And it's just kind of funny because green crabs are a predator of an oyster. So
exactly.
A little serendipitous. But anyway, yeah. Green crabs and how they saved my life. How about that? Who would think, you know? And now it's a whole different world, you know, although we're probably heading back towards COVID restrictions and all that madness again. I still think it's been an eye opener for people in our country about food. And I think we need to change people's views, you know, people's ideas about what's food. You know, they don't look at green crabs as food, but guess what? We just realized after a year of COVID that the entire food system in this country can be shut down overnight. So you might want to be able to get food out of your backyard or close to home. You know, I have no problem eating a bucket full of green crabs when there's nothing else to eat. I'm okay with that. They're pretty tasty. I'm very fortunate. You can't get them in Arizona.
True, very true.
You know.
So in terms of Rhode Island recently shifting to allow fishermen to sell directly to people, how much has this impacted your business and specifically your green crab business?
Well, for me, it's we were always allowed to sell green crabs and lobsters from the dock, but we weren't allowed to deliver them legally. So now we have dockside sales, but we also have a dealer's permit or dockside dealer's permit. So now I can deliver the green crabs. So that was a big game changer, because without that, people would have had to come to me all the time to get the crabs. And that creates a logistical nightmare, because the town of Westerly doesn't have a municipal dock. We pretty much operate out of private marinas, or guys trailer their boats, 30 commercial boats in Westerly, and you either trailer them or you pay a lot of money to have a slip in a marina. And it's, then you got to get permission from the marina to sell fish. So for me personally, and the guys in Westerly didn't really do a hell of a lot for us. For the guys in Point Judith, Newport, Saconnet, places where they have a big municipal dock, people can pull right in, pull right up, right where the boats are docked, and buy fish all day. And it's been a game changer for a lot of guys, especially the smaller boats.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense. And it's
Absolutely.
Also, I'm sure it's done a lot for local food systems and keeping food systems local.
Yeah, well, it's really always been a thing when people know they come down to the dock and they were getting crabs and lobsters, and they're taking them off of a boat. They're getting them from the guy that caught them. They're not buying them at Stop and Shop. They're not buying them at a store. So, I mean, it's the same level of that confidence in the food when the person pulls up to the dock and there's a vat full of fish and ice, and they get to pick some fish and go home with something that was caught that morning. Rather than something in a supermarket or in a big box store, some store where you have no idea where it came from or even what it is. So yeah, I think that's also a game changer. We're getting there. I think the food system in our country has to change, because now we have no choice.
I hear you 100%.
We can't depend on other people to feed us.
Completely agree. So in terms of, wrapping things up, what advice would you have for somebody who wanted to enter the green crab fishery?
Well, I tell them to go for it. Start out slow, but there are people out there that want them for now just for bait, but I think just promote yourself. I think that's what's been going on for me and a lot of the local guys here with all the fisheries. But with green crabs, I finally have a handful of people that are willing to try them for food. Took a little while to get it done, but it's a word of mouth thing. So I think more so than paying a bunch of money to market yourself, you start out slow, you get a handful of people to try them, and then you move on from there. And you start out with a handful of traps, and hopefully you can get access to areas where you can set them. But it's definitely, I think, is going to be a business that's going to expand like the skate fishery did before anybody realized you could eat them. I think the potential is there for it to happen. It's just that you got to take it slow, and we have to figure out a market. Who knows? And of course, a shout out to you guys. If it wasn't for greencrab.org, I wouldn't have gotten the business I got. It was a platform where people could find me.
Awesome. Well, that's all my questions for the interview. Is there anything else that you want to add about your business, about green crabs in general?
Well, it's interesting that they may be another species that we're not going to really know much about for a while, but down here, the Pawcatuck River had a large biomass of green crabs for a long time, and last year there were none. So they may have started already moving farther east and farther north, just with the change in water temperature. So we're not sure. We're not sure down here how long this green crab fishery is going to be around. Could last for 50 years. Or if they moved out of that river due to pollution, that's one thing, or some other unknown factor. But if it's because of water temperature, who knows what the next few years are going to bring.
And have you seen? I imagine, as a harvester, you've seen a lot of species that have been impacted by climate change.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. We catch mullet up here now, small mullet, but they're finger mullet. And I've been catching those for 10 years now. They make really good striper bait, fluke bait, sea bass bait, but they're not native to this area. They're not up here normally. And we've seen some large ones. A few big schools have come through over the years where you weren't there in time to catch them because they're pretty decent money up here. Sea bass and fluke, 10, 12 years ago, nobody would have thought of that being a major fishery here, but it is. And now they're shifting farther north. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens. All the people that say, the earth isn't warming and the oceans aren't warming. Well, they need to spend a little more time in the ocean, not just sitting next to it. Go out in the ocean and check it out. We have, more species of sharks around here lately, off of Jersey and New York. They've been catching cobia, tarpon. I just saw a video of a hammerhead off of New Jersey in real shallow water on the beach. Yeah, it's happening. It's happening faster than people realize. So, hey, on a positive note, maybe I'll be focusing on grouper and rock crabs in another 5 years.